Imagine, just for a second, a truly perfect world, like an absolute paradise, meticulously designed by a scientist named John Calhoun. In this world, there's no hunger, there's no thirst, the climate is perfectly dialed in to a balmy 68 degrees, and there are literally zero predators. It was essentially a five-star all-inclusive luxury resort, but for rodents. Sounds like the ultimate utopia, right? A place where any society should just absolutely thrive. But instead, this perfectly constructed paradise ended in a complete, total, and inescapable disaster. Welcome to the mystery of Universe 25. Now, what is truly terrifying about this experiment isn't just the fact that the society collapsed, but how incredibly fast the whole thing went down. From the moment the doors to this paradise were sealed, it took exactly 5 years. Just 5 years for a thriving, meticulously designed utopia to result in the death of every single inhabitant inside. And the cause of death? Well, it was nothing a veterinarian or a toxicologist could ever diagnose. So, the ultimate question we're left with is this: how did a perfect paradise with unlimited food, clean water, and zero predators result in total extinction? I am so glad you're joining me for this explainer today, because we're going to break down exactly what happened inside Universe 25. We'll track the timeline of this collapse and uncover what this really haunting experiment actually teaches us about the absolute necessity of having a purpose. Section 1. The perfect mouse paradise. Okay, let's dive into this. Back in 1968, John Calhoun built this massive 9-foot square enclosure inside a federal research lab in Maryland, and it was meant to be his absolute masterpiece. The conditions were just flawless. The walls were lined with what he actually called walk-up apartments, all connected by these little mesh tunnels. Honestly, everything a mouse could ever want was right there. They had unlimited food in hoppers that literally never ran empty, water bottles that never ran dry, and a perfectly stable temperature. The cages were even hand-cleaned on a strict schedule. Starting with the absolute healthiest specimens available, so zero diseases and zero predators, Calhoun calculated that this little paradise could comfortably hold around 3,800 mice. But the pacing of this collapse is deeply unsettling. See, on day 1, Calhoun placed just 8 founders inside. 4 males, 4 females. For the first 104 days, everything was great, peaceful. But then, the population just exploded, doubling every 55 days. By day 315, you've got over 600 mice jostling for space at the tops of those apartments. But then, the terrifying standstill began. By day 560, the population actually peaked at 2,200, which is well short of that 3,800 capacity. By day 920, the very last successful conception occurred. And then, on May 23, 1973, the final mouse died. Section 2, Collapse and the Behavioral Sink. Now, what's really interesting about this is that to understand the unraveling, we have to realize what happens when surplus mice have no new territory to emigrate to. Basically, logic completely disappears. This led to a phenomenon that Calhoun named the behavioral sink. You see, even though there were perfectly good, completely full food hoppers available everywhere in the enclosure, the mice began compulsively crowding around just a handful of specific feeders. They became so wired to only eat in the presence of others that an empty feeder, no matter how much food was in it, became completely useless to them. They were starving for social proximity while literally standing right next to untouched food. And as the physical space filled up, the social fabric entirely unraveled, leading to some truly horrifying behaviors. Young males with no roles to fill just drifted into the center of the enclosure, forming these listless pools of bodies. If they were attacked, they wouldn't even fight back. They would just absorb the damage. Meanwhile, a frantic group of males completely bypassed normal courtship rituals, violently forcing their way into nests. Females, unable to find a place in all this chaos, retreated to the highest apartments to live in total isolation. And most darkly, mothers who were just exhausted from defending nests without the help of males began turning on their own young. They abandoned them, forgot them, and in the worst sections, they even began eating them. It was brutal. In some areas, fewer than 1 in 20 newborns actually survived. Out of this absolute nightmare emerged a totally new generation that Calhoun called the beautiful ones, because the pups that did survive grew up in a society completely devoid of any normal social structure. They simply opted out of the species. These mice never fought, they never tried to mate, and they never socialized. All they did all day was eat, sleep, and obsessively groom themselves. Their fur was absolutely pristine because they never engaged in a single conflict. Externally, they looked like the healthiest mice in the entire colony, but internally, they were functionally dead.
Their nervous systems had developed in a world where every single social role was already filled, so they just stopped trying.
Calhoun observed this and wrote something incredibly profound. He stated, "The mice had died two deaths. The first was the death of the spirit. The second was the death of the body." Think about that for a second. The structural collapse of their society, that death of the spirit, happened years before the final physical extinction. By the time that last mouse died of old age, the species had already been dead on the inside for a very, very long time. Section 3. The comfort kills myth. So, when Calhoun published his findings, the outside world immediately grabbed hold of the research. But the public, urbanists, and politicians, from all across the political spectrum, by the way, looked at the perfect coats of the beautiful ones and drew a terrifying conclusion. Comfort kills. Abundance kills. A life with no struggle destroys itself. They used this experiment as a massive metaphor to warn that modern life, welfare, and a lack of struggle would inevitably lead to the decay and destruction of human society. It honestly became one of the most famous and widely cited cautionary tales of the entire 20th century. So the crucial point is that popular conclusion is a complete myth. It is a fundamental misreading of the data. If we actually look closely at Calhoun's paper, he didn't blame the comfort, and he definitely didn't blame the abundance of food or water. The true killer inside Universe 25 was the disappearance of meaningful roles. Section 4. The death of meaning. You see, the collapse wasn't a failure of resources. It was a failure of purpose. Calhoun wrote this directly in his paper, saying, "If the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available, only violence and disruption can follow." The structure that gave a mouse a reason to participate in its society had completely evaporated. The food didn't run out. The water didn't run out. The meaning ran out. When a paradise provides absolutely everything you need for physical survival, but totally forgets to provide a purpose for the surplus population, society fractures. Comfort didn't kill the mice. It just removed the friction that made being alive feel like something. They were healthy, they were well-fed, but they had absolutely nothing to do, nothing to defend, and zero roles to inherit. Section 5. Ideational generativity in humans. Now, here is the part almost nobody ever talks about. John Calhoun was not a doomer. He didn't run this experiment to predict the inevitable collapse of humanity. He actually ran it to figure out how to prevent it. He believed humans have a unique capability to escape this exact fate through a concept he called ideational generativity. And this brilliantly illustrates his actual solution. Simply defined, it means extending into conceptual space. You see, when our physical space contracts or traditional jobs get automated away, humans don't just give up. We expand into ideas, into digital networks, and arts. We actively build entirely new societal roles that simply did not exist a generation prior. We don't just rely on biological roles, we invent conceptual ones. Let's move to and see how this builds a really clear roadmap for human society. Unlike mice, we can consciously recognize when our physical space is reaching its limits. Step 2 is applying that ideational generativity. We extend into conceptual space. We create the internet, we write literature, we explore AI and quantum physics. And through step 3, we build entirely new societal roles. I mean, think about it. 100 years ago, a software engineer or a content creator wasn't a role that even existed. By creating these new spaces, we constantly generate new meaning for our growing population to fill, totally bypassing the physical limitations that doomed Universe 25. To put it as simply as possible, the way out of the trap is to keep making new reasons to be here. The paradise Calhoun built lacked one absolutely critical ingredient, and that was a mechanism for the mice to invent new purposes for themselves once all the traditional roles of fighting, mating, and defending nests were taken up. Humans survive because we can endlessly generate new meaning. The mice in Universe 25 were bound by their biology. They didn't have a choice when their physical world filled up. But we do. As our world becomes more populated and automated, and as old roles start to disappear, the real challenge isn't about running out of resources, it's about running out of meaning. So I want to leave you with this to think about. As we build our own modern paradises, what new conceptual roles will we choose to create to keep our society alive? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today. Keep asking questions and keep learning.